Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Kim. How are ya?
I'm here. I'm here.
I know.
Let's go with that.
I am too. I know. It's the middle of March, and it should be starting to get nice and springy, and it's so freaking
20-something.
cold. Yeah.
20-something out there. But you know what's going to make me happy? You telling this case.
Oh, this is something. You might have heard this one, but this is kind of, it's out there. So you ready? Yep.
I am so ready.
Let's go. Two girls gunned down on a beautiful June day is a headline we, as Americans, are a bit all too familiar with. Mm-hmm. However, most people would be shocked to discover that the brutal slayings took place along a tree-lined dirt road in America's heartland. This type of violence doesn't happen here, or we moved to the country to get away from this type of thing, is another thing that we often hear after such violent acts occurs. And indeed, those were the very emotions that locals expressed in June of 2008 when 11-year-old Skyla Jade Whitaker and her best friend, 13-year-old Taylor Dawn Paschal-Placker, were shot a total of 13 times while walking home from a creek on a beautiful June afternoon.
Oh.
Located in east central Oklahoma, Ofuskee County, my apologies for these names if I say this wrong, Whitaker in Ofuskee County has never been a vacation destination. It was originally populated by the Quapaw and the Osage people, but they left around 1825 when they ceded the land to the U.S. The indigenous people of the Creek tribe were relocated to the area in the early 1830s. Today, almost 10% of the population of Ofuskee County are descendant from those relocated indigenous people. Whitaker grew rapidly in its early years. Once the St. Louis and San Francisco Railroad came through, it became a shipping point and service center. Oil and gas productions brought more people in. Local farmers produced cotton, wheat, oats, alfalfa, and various fruits and vegetables. Even with all of that, the town never had more than 2,000 residents. The population peaked in 1930, and barely 1,000 people live amongst the green sandstone hills today. In fact, only about 12,000 people live in the county. The main claim to fame in that area is the birthplace of folk singer Woody Guthrie and the location of a lynching of a black woman and her son in 1911, which we will probably cover sometime. It's
terrible.
Something. It's the type of place where the local drugstore proudly displays a copy of the 10 Commandments in the front of the window, and it's also the place that is isolated enough that only about 100 students are in an entire school. Taylor ended up being the only 6th grade student. So the school combined 5th and 6th grade. And that's how she and Skyla, who was a year younger, became best friends. Both girls were the new girl that year. Skyla Whitaker was born in April of 1997 in Joplin, Missouri, and had recently moved to Whitaker with her mother, stepfather, and numerous siblings from Kansas. They bought a house in town, and Skylar had no trouble fitting in. She was funny, she was outgoing, a natural athlete, and she loved practical jokes. She adored animals, and they loved her. And she was also seen around town with a trail of cats and dogs following behind her. And she was on the cheerleading squad with her best friend, Taylor. Taylor Paschal-Placker was born in March of 1995 and had been homeschooled up until the 6th grade. So even though she was familiar with many of the town's residents, it was her first year enrolled in a public school. And she was quiet and sweet. She enjoyed 4-H club and was on the honor roll. Her grandfather described her as a person who saw the good in everybody. And Taylor's dream was to become a forensic scientist, girl after our own heart. Except we're not very scientifically minded or smart. Anyway, different story. Taylor's mother was a single parent and therefore relied on her own parents, Pete and Vicki Placker, to help raise Taylor. The Plackers, however, didn't live in town, and they lived out in the country on a dirt road, and there wasn't another residence within a mile of their home. Now, Pete and Vicki, Taylor pretty much called them mom and dad because they had raised her since a baby, but mom and dad, they were actually her grandparents. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Now, people who have always lived in the suburbs and the cities might find it hard to imagine living in a place where once the sun sets, it gets black as pitch. Like not a single light is to be seen in any direction, and there's no sounds except wildlife. And it's extremely rural. I mean, there's nothing. I remember when my husband took me to his place his parents live for the very first time, he's like, oh, it's country. I'm like, well, I was pretty much raised out in the country. And then I got there, and it's like 25 miles to the gas station. That's how country it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Nope.
I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere. Now, the highlight of the area is a place called Bad Creek Bridge. Now, Bad Creek Bridge isn't much of a bridge in the grand scheme of things. It's what's known as a concrete stringer bridge, meaning that it's basically just concrete over the metal support beams with a small raised border along the edge, right? There's no metal framework along the top. And unless a person is paying attention, you probably would drive right over it without even realized that it was a bridge at all. But for the local kids and teenagers, it was the place to hang out. It was a place for target practice and to catch turtles, a place to drink and sell drugs, and methamphetamines being on the top of that list of drugs being sold. But for these two young girls, the creek was just a place to catch turtles and frogs. They would talk about boys and collect the spent shell casings. And on that weekend in June, Skyla's parents were going out of town and made arrangements for Skyla to spend the weekend with Taylor. They dropped her off on a Friday evening. Summer break was about to start, and the girls were beyond excited to kick it off with a week-long sleepover. The Whitakers were supposed to pick up Skyla on Saturday evening, but they were behind schedule, and so they called and asked the Plackers if they could keep her just one more day. And Vicki Placker, Taylor's grandmother, didn't hesitate to say yes, of course. And that night, the girls stayed up all night long, and when Vicki checked on them the next morning at 10, she found that they hadn't even been asleep yet. Which, do you remember those days?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that's what you have to do.
That's the best part of sleepovers when you're young. So at that point, the girls crashed and slept until the afternoon. And when they got up later in the day, they ate some food and headed back down to the creek at around 4:30 or so. And the creek was only about 3/4 of a mile from the Plackers' house. When Rose Whitaker called at around 4:45, I guess, around 5, to say that she was on her way to pick up Skyla, Vicki sent her husband Peter out to find the girls because Taylor wasn't answering her cell phone. Now, once, like I said, lived in a very rural area, and cell phone service isn't reliable. So they didn't panic. But that was the last moment of normalcy the two families would ever have. About 1/4 mile from the house, Peter Placker found the girls dead, covered in blood, lying on the side of the road. Peter's quoted as saying in the book, Now I Lay Me Down by Faith Phillips, quote, I walked almost on them before I saw them. The next part has been taken from the book as it gives more details from what we can find in articles or shows on this case, and it also varies from what we've found. But Taylor was lying in the ditch, and Skyla was lying just above her on the side of the road. And at first, Peter thought that they'd been hit by a car as they were walking back from the creek. So after not finding a pulse in either girl, Peter screamed for Vicki to call 911. They weren't that far from the house, but they were still, he kind of ran down a little bit from the road and screamed at Vicki. But of course, Vicki didn't hear him. And then he went back to the girls. Now, Taylor had her cell phone in her backpack, and he could still hear it ringing because Vicki was still trying to get in touch with her. He picked it up, and he tried to call 911 himself. But of course, being out in the middle of nowhere with no connection, he couldn't get through at all. So he tried everybody that he knew. He was finally able to make a call to his daughter, Linda, who was on her way home from work. And when Linda answered, Peter told her, quote, they killed our babies.
Oh.
So Linda drove where Peter was with the girls, and he told her, don't look, just go and get Vicki, tell Vicki to call 911. So Linda left to tell Vicki. And that's when Peter's younger brother, Daryl, just happened to be driving down the road. He was unaware of what was happening. He had no clue. When he got out of the car, Daryl told him to park his vehicle across the road to block the scene. So it was just Daryl and Peter at the side of the road. And soon, another truck came down the road. So Peter got out in the road and to wave them down and tell them if, he wanted to have them block traffic. But as he got close, he realized the driver of the truck was Skyla's mom, Rose.
Oh.
Peter informed her that Skyla was gone, and Rose screamed and tried to get to Skyla, but Peter stopped her from seeing the scene. I can't imagine. Not long after that, the ambulance arrived and pronounced the two young girls dead at the scene. The police arrived then and began working the crime scene. The girls had been shot to death, and because of the position of Taylor's body, the police initially believed the crime had been sexually motivated. And at the end of the day, the police knew a few things for sure. 1, Skyla had been shot a total of 8 times with injuries to the arm, chest, abdomen, and neck. And 2, Taylor had been shot 5 times in the head, groin, and hand. And 3, there were 2 guns used in the shooting. And since they didn't recover 13 cases at the scene, they concluded that at least some of the shots had been fired from inside a vehicle. Investigators were fairly certain that whoever killed these girls was either a local, somebody who knew the area, or someone that had been a local at one time, because outsiders didn't frequently travel this road. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, or the OSBI, was called in to help with the investigation, and both girls' families were interviewed. Now, the Whitakers were ruled out pretty quickly, but it took a bit longer to clear the Plackers because Peter and Daryl had been at the crime scene alone for almost 30 minutes before the police arrived. It's a long time, and I know it's because it's plural, but 30 minutes? Lord. The police wanted to be certain that the family hadn't been trying to destroy evidence during that time. They also found it suspicious that nobody in the Placker home had heard 13 gunshots less than a quarter of a mile from their home. But it turned out that Peter had been watching a football game and had the volume turned way up on the TV. The Plackers were eventually cleared of any direct involvement as well. Now, lots of theories were shut down almost immediately. One theory was that the girls had accidentally been shot by teens target practicing, right?
No.
And the police quickly realized that they were too far from the bridge for that to happen, that there was no way that they could be shot 13 times on accident.
And it would be one.
Exactly.
One with one shot.
Exactly. Now, not to mention none of the shell casings found at the crime scene matched any of the ones at the bridge or the creek. And police were now left with 2 possible theories. One was that while playing at the creek, the 2 girls witnessed something they shouldn't have and were killed to silence them. Or the second theory, the most worrisome for the police, was that they were gunned down in an act of random violence that had no motivation at all other than just a sick sense of fun, I guess. Fun in quotation marks.
Sick would be the quotation marks.
Sick.
Because,
A criminologist, the renowned Dr. Brent Turvey, was called in. Now, he stated that the investigators should be looking for 2 local men under the age of 25, with one most likely having considerably more control over the other. The non-dominant one would be eager to please the dominant one. He also went on to say that there was an anger motivation and a sexual motivation. The anger, Turvey said, was more directed at Taylor Placker. The Turvey profile also indicated that the killer or killers had a low level of criminal skill and likely had a relationship of some sort with the victims. The killer would also have a knowledge of guns, which honestly, in that part of the area, I'm sure almost everybody had a knowledge of guns. Dr. Turvey also felt strongly that the girls were not murdered in the ditch where the bodies were found. He felt the girls were likely approached by at least 2 people. One of the killers struck Taylor across the face, probably with the butt of the gun. And he felt that the trajectory of the bullets would not have been possible had the bodies not been moved. The autopsies and forensic results would only confuse things further. Taylor had been shot in the hip-groin area, but there was no bullet hole in her shorts. This led investigators and Dr. Turvey to believe that Taylor's shorts had been off at the time of the shooting, and the killer would have had to redress the victim after the fact. Some opinions at the time were that she had been falling at a specific angle, and the bullet somehow went up the leg of her shorts and managed not to damage the clothing. Autopsies revealed that neither girl had been sexually assaulted. However, semen samples were found in both girls' underwear. And this is a pretty troubling piece of evidence, as you can see.
Yes, I would think so.
Now, it's later revealed that the girls often wore each other's clothes, including underwear. So it is possible that the semen was deposited in both pairs of underwear by just one of the girls. The evidence has never been fully explained. And the semen didn't match the DNA of any of the girls' family members. However, when police searched the Placker's house, there was semen found on Taylor's bedspread. But it turned out that it belonged to her uncle, who explained to the police that he had had sex with his girlfriend on Taylor's bed. And the reason for that was because he was married at the time and he couldn't take the girlfriend anywhere else to have sex.
I don't believe
And of
that.
course, the uncle had an alibi on the day of the murders and he was 85 miles away. So other forensic evidence concluded that the two guns used in the killings were a .22 and a .40 caliber Glock handgun. Rumors began circulating around the town because, of course, they did. It's a small town, and that's what happens. And witnesses came forward with lots of information at first. One person said they saw a middle-aged Native American man wearing a ball cap standing outside his white pickup truck along the side of the road just before the girls were killed. There are some other leads. A young guy claimed to have committed the killings just to impress his friend. Teenagers out target practicing on the same day, and someone reported a man covered with blood. But it turned out that the red paint, or the red blood that they saw, was actually red paint stains on his overall from when he was refinishing a table. And of course, all these suspects, people were eliminated. So the police, their most important lead was the .40 caliber Glock. And there's about 60 people with registered Glocks in the county and surrounding 6 counties. The police wanted the owners of those guns to bring them in, and they wanted it to be test fired. And there, they were able to eliminate at least 40 of these guns fairly quickly. That left 20 that still needed to be tested and cleared. In October of 2009, police stopped Kevin Sweat and his girlfriend Ashley Taylor for a busted taillight. The officer immediately recognized Kevin's name as being one of the 20 Glock owners who still had not brought his weapon in to be test fired. When the officer asked why he hadn't brought his gun in to be tested, he explained that he had sold the gun to a woman some time ago. He hadn't asked too many questions during the sale and couldn't remember her name. So the officer then searched the car and found marijuana and a case for the Glock, but there was no Glock in it. And Sweat explained that the girl he had sold the gun to didn't want the case, and he had actually forgot he had even had it. He also told the cop that he originally bought the gun from a policeman in Henrietta just shortly after his 21st birthday. Investigators would later track down the Henrietta police officer, and that part of the story checked out. But during the traffic stop, the police officer arrested both Sweat and his girlfriend on drug possession charges, which they were later released very shortly afterwards. A reward for $30,000 was set up for information leading to the arrest of the persons responsible for the murders of Taylor and Skyla. The money was raised through various donations and fundraisers. Sadly, it would be another 2 years, and it would take the disappearance and death of a woman from Okmulgee before any new information would come to light on the murders of Taylor Placker and Skyla Whitaker. On July 29, 2011, police get a call about a missing woman, and her parents believe that her fiancé had something to do with her disappearance. The young woman was Ashley Taylor, and her fiancé was none other than Kevin Sweat. Now, Kevin Sweat was the guy that I just talked about, the one that sold his .40 caliber Glock to some unnamed woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
The story that Taylors told the police immediately raised concern. They told the police that Ashley had been dating Kevin for about 3 years, and both Ashley and Kevin had been outcasts in high school. They were neither jocks or drug heads or even brainiacs. They just were average kids who got picked on and floated through school, longing for the day when they could get out. And the two bonded over their similar experiences. They had been friends before they started dating, and Ashley had been there for Kevin when his brother Brian Sweat overdosed in 2007 in a Henrietta motel room. To most who knew Kevin, the death of his brother was the beginning of an emotional downward spiral. So the story that Mr. and Mrs. Taylor told about their daughter Ashley is that she and Kevin left for Louisiana to get married. Ashley Celeste Taylor, who was 23 at the time, was super excited to get married. And when she left for Oklahoma, she told her mother that she would call her in 2 weeks when she returned from their wedding trip, but she never called.
Oh.
She never even called to wish her brother a happy birthday, which was totally out of character for Ashley. And just like the Gabby Petito case, Kevin Sweat returned to Offusky County without his fiancée. When Ashley's parents went to speak with Kevin's family, they discovered that they had no idea about the wedding plans. In fact, Kevin had told them that he and Ashley had broken up. Now, Kevin was close to his aunt, or to an aunt, and she knew that Kevin and Ashley were engaged. But before the couple left for Louisiana, Kevin had told this aunt that he had planned to tell Ashley that he was going to go to his dad's house to get money for the trip, drop her off at her mom's house, and then never come back to get her because he didn't want to be in the relationship anymore. He wanted to be free of everything.
So he was going to break up with her.
Not really. He was kind of going to ghost her. He was going to say, yeah, let me get my money. I'll be right back.
Even worse.
And then never, chicken shit. He didn't want to break up to her face. When Ashley's parents called Kevin to find out why he hadn't heard from their daughter, Kevin told them that they had been in a fight and that he left her on the side of the road and didn't know where she was. Kill him. Seriously, for leaving your daughter on the side of the road?
Mm-hmm.
Kevin also told his aunt this story, and she said that while he was telling her this, he seemed very nervous and he couldn't make eye contact with her. And then when they were alone, he asked her if she would still love him, if he had done something really bad, and maybe would she lie for him? And she answered yes on the first question, that she absolutely would still love him. But she said absolutely not. No lying. No lying. When Michael Taylor, Ashley's father, told the police his concerns, he added that when he confronted Kevin about Ashley's disappearance, Kevin said, quote, "I guess I'll get banned for this, just like I did with the Walitka girls."
Huh.
And the police found that to be quite an odd thing to say. Because
I would think so.
He was never blamed for anything.
Kind of like he's telling us on himself.
Kind of. Yeah, the police did find that quite odd. So investigators brought Kevin Sweat in for questioning because that's what you would do. His story was that he and Ashley had been arguing in the car about his mother's jewelry that had gone missing. Ashley got angry that he accused her of stealing it, which most people would. In the middle of the argument, she told him that she wanted out of the car. So he pulled over to the side of the road, and he said that Ashley jumped out before the car had even stopped moving. And he just kept on driving, leaving her there on the side of the road. And he drove a bit further, then he got worried about her. Then he went back to check on her, but she was already gone. And he had not heard from Ashley since. And as plausible as that may seem to be, it didn't account for why Ashley had not been in contact with her family or friends. She had a phone that she shared with Kevin, and I'm sure she had it on her. When pressed further, Kevin finally admitted that Ashley was dead. First, he claimed she killed herself. Then he changed the story to say that he'd helped her along. According to Sweat, the two were by a lake in Nicholas Park in Henrietta, still arguing, when Ashley ran down to the dock, and that's where she threatened to kill herself. He threw his knife at her, which she picked up, and then she sliced her throat and fell into the lake. Later, he said that he assisted her by slicing her throat and shoving her into the water. Authorities dragged the lake but didn't find a body. There was no sign of Ashley's blood on the dock, so they decided to go to his residence and search for physical evidence of Ashley. And at the time, he was living at his father's house. And let it be known that Kevin's dad knew of Ashley, but Kevin never talked about her very often. Kevin's father was cooperative with investigators and even led them to the place on the property where Kevin liked to do target practice. And there, the police found a burn spot. And Kevin's father told them that Kevin had told him that he had started a fire to roast hot dogs and marshmallows and even burned some trash from his car. And his father was upset with Kevin about that because there was a burn ban. And with the high winds and the dry conditions of Oklahoma that they had been having, would have easily started a wildfire. But this was too big to be a bonfire or a cookout, and it was too small to be a brush fire. So the forensic team dug in and found bone fragments and buttons from blue jeans. And in the house, they found items like sunglasses that were similar to those that Ashley owned. It was either some places said sunglasses, some said glasses. So some sort of eyewear. Kevin's father even gave the investigators a ring with a small diamond he had found earlier in the fire pit. Later, DNA revealed that the bone fragments were that of Ashley Celeste Taylor, and the ring was the engagement ring Kevin had given Ashley. However, another thing that got investigators' attention was that they found shell casings in and around the fire pit. Shell casings from a .40 caliber Glock that Kevin Sweat had sold. It turned out that those shell casings matched the casings at the Skyla Whitaker and Taylor Paschal-Placker's crime scene in June of 2008. The OSBI had just gotten the break that would blow open the now stagnant investigation of Skyla and Taylor's murders. And now at this point, it came to light that Kevin Sweat had worked with Taylor Paschal-Placker's aunt. They also discovered a website that Kevin had used as sort of an online diary where he posted plenty of photographs of himself with various weapons and guns. And in one post, he said that he had recently gotten engaged and that it was the, quote, biggest mistake of my life. He went on to say that his fiancée was messed and medicated for mental issues. When Kevin Sweat was brought in for questioning, he denied having killed the girls. In a matter of hours, he was asked over 200 times if he committed the crimes, and each time he said no. He also claimed not to know who the girls were. And most people didn't believe that since, it's a very small community. However, one could argue that most 25-year-old guys don't pay much attention to who the kids in the neighborhood or people are. But then since it's been revealed that he actually worked with Taylor's Aunt Linda at a Subway restaurant. At one point during the interrogation, Kevin Sweat said, quote, what would be the point in killing kids? And as time went on, he did eventually crack. His confession started with, quote, I guess I was having mental issues and I was seeing things.
Really?
Seeing what? The police asked. Quote, I don't know. Things. Monsters. I see demons, vampires, monsters, demons, whatever. I do have some problems. Kevin Sweat replied. Kevin told police that he saw demons approaching him at the road. And the police asked them, well, what did you do? And he said, quote, I was scared. They were still coming at me, so I shot them. He went on to say that he emptied one gun, then got his other gun from the car and continued shooting. According to Kevin's confession, there were 2 guns and 1 shooter. Him. Kevin Sweat pleaded guilty to all 3 murders to avoid the death penalty. Investigators believe that his motive for killing the girls was revenge. Kevin's brother, Brian, the one who had overdosed on drugs, those drugs were sold to him by Chris Placker, Taylor's uncle.
Oh.
Even at the time of his brother's death, he had told people that he blamed the Placker family. Chris Placker testified that at that time, he was selling as much as $250 a day in methamphetamines. Chris could quite literally make more money selling drugs than any other job in the area could ever offer. The median income for an entire family in that county is just $40,000. 28% of that population lives below poverty line. Unfortunately, some believe, and Kevin Sweat among them, that the drugs Chris sold Brian were bad or were tainted or laced with something stronger than normal. And in Kevin Sweat's mind, the Plackers took his brother. So when the opportunity to get back at them was walking down the road in front of them, he took it. Unfortunately, neither Taylor nor Skylar had anything to do with Chris's drug dealings or Brian's choice to buy and use the drug. They were just 2 happy young girls looking forward to a new school year and a chance to be best friends forever. Kevin Sweat later decided he wanted to change his guilty plea to not guilty, claiming that he felt he had no choice in making the plea and that his attorneys ignored the evidence he suggested. And of course, the judge denied his request. And according to Justica.com, Quote, a judge may deny a request to withdraw a plea if it would harm the prosecution's ability to prove its case or if the defendant agreed to waive the right to an appeal. The website also explained that a judge would be more likely to allow the request if it was made before the sentencing, which it was. This may have been the reason for what happened on the day of Kevin Sweat's sentencing, as Sweat was to confer with his lawyer before the sentencing was delivered. His lawyer had him uncuffed. At this point, Kevin, who had managed to smuggle a razor blade into the courtroom, lunged for his lawyer and tried to slice his throat.
Oh, that one. I thought he was going to kill himself.
No. Oh. Why would he? He's, anyway. His attorney, court-appointed lawyer, Peter Astor, was able to get his hand up in time to block Kevin's attack, partially. He ended up with a very shallow cut across his neck. Kevin Sweat was then handed 3 life sentences. So the fact that Kevin Sweat is a dangerous, violent individual is not in question. The death and dismemberment of his fiancée, Ashley Taylor, is also unquestionably Kevin Sweat's doing. Judging by his social media posts, one could even say that he vaguely alluded to her murder months before he actually killed her, making it all premeditated. His capability to commit violence is not in question at all. One veteran investigator who had interrogated hundreds of criminals described what it was like to interview Kevin. He said, quote, he was intelligent, quiet, polite, and unnerving. He went on to say that he had never been so unnerved or uncomfortable while interrogating a criminal. However, some believe that Kevin did not kill the 2 girls, Taylor and Skyla, or at least if he did, he didn't act alone.
Oh, why?
Well, the prosecution at Kevin's trial were the ones who claimed that Kevin killed the girls out of revenge for his brother's death, but Kevin has never actually said that at all. And there was semen, of course, found in the girls' underwear, and it didn't match Kevin's DNA. And to this day, that semen has not been matched to any donor at all. In fact, that particular piece of evidence has never been explained. It has been proposed that the fact semen was found in the girls' underwear has no bearing on their deaths, or in this case at all, or it could point to the involvement of a second party. None of Kevin's DNA was found at the scene of the girls' murders either. And if anything, like fingerprints on the shell casings or the tire tracks at the scene of the crime, nothing matched to Kevin. So nothing's been released to the public on the semen at all. And while one can certainly believe that Kevin was responsible for the Whitaker murders, since his gun did the shooting, investigators were never able to place the gun in his hands. Dr. Turvey's profile of the case turned out not to be entirely accurate either. If Kevin Sweat killed the girls with the help of a second party, that second party has escaped justice.
I think Kevin would sing like a canary, though. And
you would think.
Just like from what I know, and I don't know very much of them, but yeah.
But you would think that, like Turvey said, one was dominant and one wasn't. The dominant one wouldn't say, yeah, I had help. I did it all myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know, though.
That's what I feel. I mean, I've never had the background to do it. Or the background to say, not a professional.
I just play one on the podcast.
Exactly.
But if he did it as a drive-by, like from a vehicle, there probably wouldn't be a whole lot.
But it wasn't quite a drive-by. I mean, he would have to kind of stop. 13 shots is a lot, and that's 13 shots that actually hit.
All right, keep going. I'm just listening.
Well, and sadly, Ashley Taylor seems to get lost in the shuffle of this convoluted story. She was a bright girl who was totally devoted to Kevin. Family and friends said that the longer they were together, the less of her that they recognized. Kevin changed her and then discarded her. Some have put forth the theory that the reason Kevin killed her was because she had discovered that he was the one responsible for the deaths of Taylor and Skyla.
That's what I was thinking.
But there's no proof. Yeah.
Or he had told her that, but how would there be any proof?
Exactly.
I mean, if he just confessed that to her, and then I want to break up with her, but I can't break up with her because I've already confessed my deepest, darkest secret.
Right.
So I will just kill her, because otherwise you just break... I would say otherwise you just break up with her, but we know from doing the podcast that's not what people do.
You can't, yeah. And it appears that Ashley had fallen victim to the age-old cycle of abuse and gaslighting, sacrificing all her self-worth to an unworthy boyfriend. Before she left on her trip to Louisiana with Kevin, she got her hair cut and she donated the hair to Locks of Love.
Aww.
Her last act before being murdered was one of charity and compassion for others. If you drive south along County Line Road now between E1120 and E1130, you'll cross the Bad Creek Bridge, even though there's no sign announcing it. A little further down the road, on the right, you will see the shrine still there for the girls all these years later. Crosses, statues, stuffed animals. They're all dirty and ragged now. And if you follow the road just a little further down on the right, you'll find what used to be the home of the Plackers. Peter said that it was just too painful to stay there after the girls were murdered, so he and his family packed up and moved. It's just a small home sitting back from the road. And just looking at it, one would never know that it once housed two bright young girls who told stories and laughed until the wee hours of the morning, dreaming of the days to come. You can go online and satellite, and you can see all the, plug in the location, the E11 and E30, and you go down, you can see the
area,
the stuffed animals, and the like little shrine to the girls. It's very sad. For no reason. I mean, these little girls were just out catching frogs and turtles, and this
senseless
horrible
is what it is.
A horrible person claiming he saw demons, which who knows?
Well, he did kill Ashley, so he did have that killing in him. Regardless.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, he killed them. There's no doubt. I totally believe.
Yeah.
He's responsible for their death.
And where is he today? Is he still locked up?
Still locked up in prison. Tell you the truth, I didn't look to see where.
That's okay. I just want to make sure he's. I was wondering if he was dead or still alive.
No, he got 3 life terms. 3 life terms in prison. So
good.
Yeah.
Good. Mm-hmm. He's right where he should be.
Exactly. And there's a couple shows, and one he's interviewed, and I forget which one it is. It'll be in the show notes. Which show, and he is creepy. I mean, he's...
So you can see it in him? Like you can see the creepiness?
Yeah. It's the book, Now I Lay Me Down by Faith Phillips. I read it, and I think she's a local author. She self-published the book. It's about 162 pages. I think it's about $10 on Kindle, on Amazon if you want to buy it. Link in show notes. She talks about how one of the investigators in this crime, and if you believe in psychics or whatnot, but they had gone with a friend or a relative to a psychic. And in the middle of this woman's reading, the psychic turns to them and says, those 2 girls are here, and something to the fact of, you're going to catch the guy who did it, and he's going to have red curly hair. Well, at the time that Kevin arrested, he kind of had like he used Sun-In or some kind of like bleachy type stuff on his hair, and his hair was kind of like a reddish, orange, curly. So that was kind of fun. That's in the book.
Interesting.
So, the book was fun. Yeah.
Well, not fun. I wouldn't say fun, Jen.
The book was a good. It was a good read. The author seemed to know a little bit more and goes in a little bit more detail than what we do here. So I suggest, if you are interested, head on over to Amazon and check it out.
Do we have any promos this week, Jen?
We do have a promo, but before we get into the promo...
Oh, okay.
I want to talk about how you and I are going to be at the True Crime Podcast Festival in Austin, Texas on August 25th through the 27th.
Can I do
it's going to be a great time, and if you want to come meet us...
Texas accent here, or no?
I'd rather you not.
Okay. You always tell me
You could try, but you never quite bring it in. Anyway.
Okay.
But yes, we are going to be there with a bunch of other podcasts, including the man we have a promo of today. And if you want a discount, go to truecrimepodcastfestival.com, enter the code OTCP, and you'll get a discount on your tickets. So come see us, and we will buy you a drink. If you come, introduce yourself, we will take you out that night and buy you a drink of your choice.
Heck yeah. All the ice water you can drink. It's all on us.
We make so much money.
We're so
on this podcast,
rich.
We put the Hiltons to shame. So much money. Jeff Bezos, we're after you, buddy.
Yeah,
anyway, also, Camille won't be there, but I will. In May 6th in Birmingham, Alabama, there's going to be a True Crime Live. And it's going to be at the Wild Roast Coffee Shop. And if you want tickets to come see me with my buddy Brandon from Southern Gothic Ghosty Stories, Brandon, love him. He's going to be there with me. Our two fun friends, Jen and Lindsay of Corpus Delecti, are going to be there. They've actually did the whole thing. Nina from Already Gone. She's a blast. Love her. Josh from True Crime Bullshit will be there. He's fun to hang out with too. And then also Charlie from Crime Lines. She'll be there. And if you go to wildroastcafe.com, you can buy tickets there. And I believe they're $20. Don't know if there is a code or not, but I'll check on it to make sure.
Sounds good.
And
wish I could be there.
I know. I wish you could too, but you've got other plans. What's going on that day?
I finally got asked to prom, Jen.
Finally, after how many years?
40 something. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
It's your daughter's senior prom. And
it is my daughter's senior prom. Yep.
It's actually my husband's birthday. I don't care. I'm going.
But you're going to miss that.
He's had them before. He'll have them again. It's all good.
Oh, boy.
But anyway, our promo is from our buddy. We absolutely enjoy him. He's amazing. It's Bob Mata and his podcast, Defense Diaries. Cam and I cannot stress enough how much we love this man. To know him is to love him. Like when you first meet him, you're like, oh, okay. And then when you really get to know him, you're like, oh my God, I love him. Love him. Like he is a bright spot in the podcasting world, and his podcast is amazing. His first season, his dad he talks about how on his 21st birthday, his dad gave him a box, and inside of it was a bunch of cassette tapes. And he's like, what the heck? He's like, I'm 21 years old. I got this box of cassette tapes, right? What am I going to do with it? Turns out his dad was an attorney for John Wayne Gacy, and those are the tapes that he recorded with John Wayne Gacy. I mean, amazing, right?
Really?
And so the first season is about John Wayne Gacy. And Bob, it's I can't believe it's not bigger than it is, really. I mean, Bob's a wonderful guy. The podcast is phenomenal. His producer, Darren, is just as wonderful as Bob is. Totally go check him out.
Good team. They're even better than we are, for real. Well. And more professional.
Everybody's more professional than we are.
It's true.
That's our charm. That's our charm.
Is that what they call it? Okay.
Anyway, come see us in Austin, Texas for True Crime Podcast Festival, True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival. They changed that. Come see me live in Birmingham, Alabama. And definitely cost you nothing, but check out Defense Diaries because it's one of the best ones.
It is.
It's going to be huge.
It's there's a couple I don't want to say groundbreaker. What would you say? There's a couple of moments when you're like, no way, that kind of thing. So in there. So check it out. We love Bob. We
love him. He's the best. Right. His wife's the best too. So anyway, that's all I've got. Do you have anything else?
I don't. Not really. I don't. Just, keep on keeping on, people. That's all I can say about that. And until next time, remember, lock your doors.
And keep passing those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertese from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from OctoberPod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.
I'm Bob Motta, host of the true crime podcast Defense Diaries. When I started this podcast with my executive producer, Darren Wood, we did it because we had hours and hours of interviews between John Wayne Gacy and my father, his trial attorney. Now, we wanted the Gacy season to be nothing like what has been done before. We wanted to focus on the victims, not the killer. We wanted to focus on the investigation and the arrest, not the killer. And finally, we wanted to focus on the trial, not the killer. And we accomplished all of that, and more. What we uncovered about the incredible, true story about how law enforcement got Gacy off the streets in 10 short days after his reign of at least 6 years of terror is nothing short of mind-blowing. And most importantly, it's 100% fact. We are not overselling that fact. We believe it is, without question, the unrivaled authority on the Gacy case, without it actually being about Gacy. This is literally not my father's Gacy story. In the second season of the pod, we dive into the case of Dr. Anthony Garcia, who currently sits on death row. I just so happen to have represented Anthony Garcia at trial. Season 2 plunges into the horrific crimes, the investigation, and ultimately the trial, with a level of detail that can only be accomplished by being there and working the case. We will take you on the journey that will bring you into the war room with us as we tried the case. We will deep dive beneath the surface and provide you with a listening experience that will be a close second. Defense Diaries is a true deep dive serialized podcast, and we don't believe that there's another podcast out there like us. Look, law enforcement and prosecutors have been used nearly exclusively to provide all of us with their perspective as to all these cases that have been covered since true crime became a thing. But guess what? There are two sides to every story, and now it's the defense's turn to give you our perspective. So if any of that sounds like your thing, make sure you follow and subscribe on Apple Pods or Spotify or wherever you get your pods.